Speaking of intelligent people, RFK Jr. just picked up his running mate. This is a little bit crazy, and I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on it. He chose a 38-year-old Bay Area lawyer, Nicole Shanahan, as his VP. RFK explained why he chose her. She knows big tech very well, how they use AI to exploit the public, how they censor and surveil Americans to push certain agendas. She understands the health consequences of toxins in our air, soil, and food. And he wanted a younger person to represent millennials and Gen Z. He says younger generations feel like nobody represents them in Washington. He also wanted an athlete in good shape to inspire Americans to live healthier lives. And Shanahan donated $4 million in support of RFK Jr.'s Super Bowl ad that ran earlier this year. Sachs, what do you think of this pick?
Well, this pick does not excite me. I'll be frank. But since I'm going to say something critical, I want to let me start by saying something positive, because I really, I love Bobby Kennedy. I mean, I think that he represents a number of really great issues that I agree with. I mean, first of all, he's been the most articulate critic of the Ukraine war, understands it deeply, and has explained it extremely well. He stood up for sealing the border. He went down there, showed that it's out of control, completely agree. He was a vocal critic of Fauci and lockdowns, was completely right about COVID. He supports civil liberties and free speech. So, I want to say, Bobby Kennedy's great. The issue I have with this pick is that she doesn't represent any of those issues. She has a completely different issue matrix. And I watched her speech. And just to say something positive about her, I mean, I like her enthusiasm. I think she's 38, and it's nice to have someone running for political office who's not in their 70s or 80s. And I think she's genuine. I actually think she's saying what she really believes, and that's really nice and refreshing. But again, if you go back to the issues themselves, she brought up 3 issues. Number one is she says she wants to make Americans healthy again. It's the focus on chronic disease. I'm not saying she's wrong about that. That's just not my issue. Number 2, she brought up criminal justice reform. This one concerns me. Apparently, she donated to Gascon, who's a Soros DA, who helped destroy San Francisco and then failed upward to LA. So apparently she's a Gascon supporter. That does not fill me with confidence. That is a, quite frankly, luxury liberal belief in this decarceration idea. So I'm not excited about that. Her third issue was climate and environment related, but in a very specific way. She went after big agriculture. She said, we can no longer support extractive corporate agriculture. I'm going to let Freeberg speak to that one. I can't really say whether she's right or wrong, but that's just not one of my issues. So listen, at the end of the day, I feel like this pick accentuates and underlines the issues in Bobby's platform that appeal to the left, frankly, to liberals. And I think Bobby's candidacy is a complex candidacy that brings together people from both left and right. But again, this pick does not speak to me. It speaks to the more liberal parts of his coalition.
Does it increase his chances? And who would have been the person who would have increased his chances most?
Tulsi Gabbard. The person who would have been amazing would have been Tulsi Gabbard. Okay. If he had chosen Tulsi, that would have blown the doors off.
Slam dunk.
Yeah. I mean, and Tulsi's been saying, Chamath, publicly that she would be proud to serve with Trump, and it's seeming likely that she's got a shot at that, yeah? Being the VP for Trump?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Okay.
Let me just say something else. I think Tulsi Gabbard is really impressive. I think she's independent, and I think she really stands firmly on her own 2 feet in a way that I find inspiring. I, like Sachs, have many, many positive thoughts about Bobby Kennedy. I think he was really a breath of fresh air, Jason, in this election cycle, because he was able to say the unsayable things and made those things more easy to be said by others. And I think that there's a really important role in that. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And then the fact that he said things that were so unconventional and not mainstream that are now mainstream views, I think says a lot to the fact that he was pretty grounded in first principles thinking on those topics. And I think that having those kinds of people in office are really good for America. All of that said, I do agree with David that I think the pick was meant to be more about covering his left flank. And I found that an odd calculation. And I wonder whether it wouldn't have been easier to cover the right flank. And there are different folks that could have been in the mix to do that. And so I think that it was a calculation, though. And I think it's about, he has a core set of issues. It's about whether he appeals more to this side or to this side in order to get the totality of the votes that he thinks is possible. Second, he was under a little bit of a time constraint because some of these states need the VP candidate named, and he's under a shot clock that the other two are not. So, I mean, I wish Bobby the best because I think some combination of Bobby doing well and some upheaval between the Democrats and the Republicans is really the only chance we have of having a credible third party. Well, let's see now what happens. By the way, we should just say, Joe Lieberman passed away, which is really unfortunate. He was a really independent thinker as well. Let's see what No Labels really does here. There's a little bit of chaos over at No Labels, I think. But so there's a lot of moving parts. So it was clearly calculus. I don't totally understand what that formula was, though.
Just to build on something Jamas said, there's a report by Colin Rugg that the DNC realizes what Jamas said about this covering Bobby's left flank rather than his right flank. And apparently they're in somewhat of a panic about this. And I think what you're going to see is that lawyers from the DNC and the Biden campaign are going to fight tooth and nail to keep this ticket off the ballot, at least in the major contested states, like the 5 or 6 states where the presidency will be decided in 2024. And of course, they'll be saying they're doing this to save democracy. But you're going to see, I think, a full court press by DNC lawyers to keep the Kennedy-Shanahan ticket off the ballot.
Yeah, this seems really like it's going to damage Biden, which was my original prediction. And that reason why a lot of the right wing were supporting RFK was because they saw this as a clear path to take away a couple of points from Biden. And
I think the first part of what you
happening.
said,
yeah.
First part of what you said is 100% right. I'm not sure that a bunch of Republicans are going to get organized, Jay Cal, to vote for RFK in that way.
Oh, no, I don't think they're going to do that. I think they supported him publicly in order to build him up as a centrist candidate, knowing that it would take away from Biden. So I just think on a strategic political basis, all these Republicans...
They didn't do that for Marianne Williamson. Why not?
Yeah, no, she's not electable. Yeah, no, it's because she's not electable. I mean, she's
by the way,
a bunch of crystals and not like a viable candidate. It's pretty clear she's not viable.
Why can't you just accept that people on the right like the issues that Bobby spoke to? Isn't that the simplest explanation?
Because I think that they're partisans and they just want to win. So I don't think it has anything to do with what you were saying, which would be like authentically liking and connecting with what he's saying. I don't think it was that. I think it's a strategic plan to try to pull Biden votes. And I think Republicans are smart for doing that.
You think Bobby's a plant? You think he's a plant?
I think their support for him is for nefarious reasons. They're supporting him to take votes away from Biden. And here it is. We're all agreeing that this is going to take votes away from Biden. So I think it's a very clever strategy on the GOP's part.
Hold on. Just to add one point to that. Remember that when Bobby entered the race, he did so as a Democrat. He did so challenging Joe Biden for the nomination of the Democratic Party. How did the Democratic Party react? They kept him off the ballot. They wouldn't give him a fair shot.
Yep.
That's why he went independent. So he did not have to be this, sort of like what you're kind of implying, like a fly in the ointment type third party candidate. He tried to be the Democratic candidate.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let him compete. If they had let him compete in a fair way, maybe he would have stayed a Democrat.
I would have loved to have a massive competitive field of Democrats. I think the Democrats are screwing this up big time. I think this could be I think he could peel off a couple of percentage points. Yeah. In those
I think
states.
You're right.
More.
I think you're right.
I think it's more than that.
So, I mean,
I think it's more than that.
So we all agree that's what's happening here. Then we're just disagreeing.
No, I don't. I think this is. I think this
we
is where
agree it's taking points away. Yeah,
I think we agree about that. But what I'm saying is that this is where we've ended up. I don't think it was constructed to be this way.
Interesting. Freeberg, your thoughts on this candidate, specifically around her love of organic food and wanting to take on the pesticides, toxic food, and the industrial food
I
complex.
remain steadfast in my commitment to there being only one major issue facing this country, and that is the federal debt and the deficit. We are increasing the federal debt by $1 trillion every 100 days. That number is not slowing down. The current budget proposal from the Biden administration calls for over $7.2 trillion to be spent next year. That makes the U.S. federal government roughly 1/3 of our country's GDP. The outrageousness of the condition that the U.S. is in right now makes it so insane to me that we are talking about any other topic like big agriculture or whatever other nonsense was being spattered about as important topics to this particular person. If every voting citizen of the United States does not recognize the severity of the deficit and debt problem that the federal government faces, you are wasting your vote. And no candidate is speaking to what is clearly the biggest issue of our time. And we need to address this issue headlong. So I don't care about this person or anyone else who's running for office that is talking about stuff that we cannot actually address and problems we cannot actually solve if we don't get our fiscal affairs in order. That's my point of view.
Got it. And respect for that. Can anybody win the presidency on a, hey, we're going to balance the budget, we're going to cut spending platform?
Nope.
So they can't win, and it's an existential issue.
That's why I'll keep shouting into the abyss and hope that a few people hear it and that at some point it becomes a topic that folks do begin to focus on. I think that the necessity of raising tax rates, the necessity ultimately of cutting entitlement programs, the necessary inflation that will arise because of the condition of the federal government's debt level, because we're going to have to keep printing money. These are the sorts of things that are like a boiling pot that one day folks will wake up and say, well, what the heck happened? Everything got mismanaged. And it's not a Democrat problem. It's not a Republican problem. It's a fundamental problem of people voting themselves all the money and people getting voted into office by saying, I'm going to do more than is being done today. And that costs money. And no one actually addresses the rampant misuse of funds, the lack of accountability in spending, and the fact that we have an incredible amount of negative ROI spending, and the fact that we've effectively created an economy that's fundamentally dependent on federal spending. And I'll go through some statistics when we talk about Biden's budget later in the show, but I think that the significance is just overlooked by all of these candidates, and we're not really talking about the thing that matters. So